start with this. Well, word around the campfire seems to be that Ebony Bridges has been added to the September 4th card, the big rematch between Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington. It will also feature Katie Taylor, the undisputed lightweight champion, and the challenger, the mandatory challenger, Jennifer Hahn. Just as well, Conor Benn versus Adrian Granados has been added to the card.
It's stacked.
They're expecting approximately 20,000 fight fans over there at Headingley Stadium in Leeds.
It's a real nail-biter for those Leeds fans.
Because the entire card in its entirety all culminates to the big rematch between Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington. Josh is attempting to avenge that shock upset loss he suffered at the hands of Lara several months ago. And
it's a big card.
Has all the makings of a big card, and anybody fighting on it, you know, it's a big opportunity for them, particular to this conversation, Ebony Bridges. If Ebony Bridges is going to be fighting on this thing,
I don't know who it's against.
It's obviously not going to be a rematch with Shannon Courtenay, because Shannon's set to be in action in October on the undercard of Liam Smith versus Anthony Fowler against unbeaten Jamie Mitchell. It's obviously not going to be Shannon. I doubt it's going to be for a world title. I mean, I know she's not going to be fighting the reigning WBC champion, Julie Hangaluna, it being that this card is set to go down on the 4th, whereas Julie Hangaluna's next fight against Candy Sandoval, that's set to go down that same month on the 10th. So she's definitely not fighting Luna. I don't think she's going to be fighting Dina Thorsland either, it being that, according to Lee Eaton, who does some promotion for the people over there at MTK Global, in case you're not aware, Dina Thorsland is an MTK Global fighter. And according to Lee, you know, Dina is defending her title in November, and then afterwards, they're looking to unify. This card's set to go down in September. Dina's next ring appearance, that's supposed to be in November.
So I don't think Ebony's fighting Dina next.
Not if Lee Eaton's proposed schedule checks out and it happens that way. And that leaves only Argentinia's Maria Cecilia Roman, the reigning IBF champion at this weight. There's an off chance that maybe Ebony fights her.
It's a bit soon for that.
It is. I mean, I don't know that Ebony Bridges is really ready for a Maria Cecilia Roman. Not yet, anyway. I mean, maybe in 1 or 2 more fights.
Levels to this.
Melissa Odessa, who we often talk about here on the channel. She took on Maria Cecilia Roman not that long ago, and she actually managed to win a points decision. But Melissa has a deeper amateur background than an Ebony Bridges. You know, Melissa fought the likes of a Michaela Mayer in the amateurs, whereas Ebony Bridges, she's a late starter in the sport of boxing. She don't come from that same kind of amateur background. So there are levels to the game, and in spite of being in similar places in their careers here and now, on paper, I'm not sure that Ebony's really ready for somebody like Maria Cecilia Roman. And I'm not averse to it. You know, if she thinks she's ready and the people over there at Matchroom want to make the fucking fight. But I don't actually think that's what they're doing. I don't actually think that's what's next for Ebony's immediate future.
I don't think her next fight is going to be a title fight.
I think what we're going to see in Ebony Bridges' next fight, her very next fight, if she is to fight on the undercard of Lara versus Warrington 2, I think we're going to see an opponent that's a cut above a Bet Connolly, somebody who can pose a little bit more of a challenge, but not someone as challenging as Maria Cecilia Roman, because, you know, based on what I saw in that Odessa fight, you know, she could really upset the apple cart for Ebony. If the Maria Cecilia Roman that fought Melissa Odessa shows up for Ebony Bridges, well, that might be one step up too far.
And too soon.
Maybe afterwards. Maybe after Ebony's next fight. But straight away, I don't think so. Shannon Courtenay has made an Ebony Bridges rematch contingent upon Ebony procuring a world title of her own. So at some point, if Ebony wants that rematch with Shannon, she's going to have to go through one of these other girls, either Julie Hangaluna or Dina Thorsland or Maria Cecilia Roman. It seems very much like an eventuality.
But I don't think that's next.
I don't really know. If Ebony Bridges is going to make an appearance on the undercard of Warrington versus Lara 2, I could definitely see it being a step up from a Bet Connolly, definitely. But a full-on title fight with a full-on titleist? Not sure about that. In any event, we'll see. We'll find out. In other news, per tweet from Mike Coppinger and his sources, WBC's president Mauricio Suleiman tells ESPN he's ordered a light heavyweight fight between Artur Beterbiev and Marcus Browne. Beterbiev, ESPN's number 175-pound boxer, holds 2 titles. Browne is our number 10 light heavyweight. Full story coming to ESPN, and this was a conceivable scenario, a conceivable outcome, because Joe Smith Jr., he's fighting Umar Salimov next, his mandatory challenger. And after that, he's supposed to be fighting Danny Jacobs early next year, provided he makes it through the Salimov fight. In essence, Joe's not unifying, and if Joe's not unifying, well, Artur, he's got to satisfy his mandatories. That's unless Artur wants to go ahead and unify with Dimitri Bivol. I really don't know how likely that is, because Eddie Hearn's got a plan of his own for his boys. What he's planning on doing is getting Joshua Buatsi out there one more time before this year is out, and then setting up a match between Joshua Buatsi and Dimitri Bivol sometime next year. And I think if there were more willingness on both sides, not just one, I think if there were more willingness and eagerness from both Top Rank and Matchroom to do the unification match between Artur and Dimitri, perhaps the fight would materialize, could materialize. But here and now, it just doesn't seem that way, doesn't feel that way. Feels like, you know what, Eddie's going to go ahead with that plan, and Top Rank's going to do what Top Rank's going to do. And if that's a Marcus Browne fight, it's a Marcus Browne fight.
The catalyst is Joe.
It seems like Joe Smith Jr. and Joe LaGuardia, they want to get as many miles out of that WBO title as they can. And, you know, it's for this reason they rather satisfy a mandatory challenger in Umar Salimov than unify titles with Artur Beterbiev. We all know that Artur is the riskier fight. And Joe's reign as a champion at light heavyweight, it could come to an abrupt end if he goes into that fight straight away. There is that possibility. So why do that when you can defend the title 2 times, make yourself some money, and, you know, if Artur's still around, you get around to him. That seems to be the hierarchy of thought, and that's what sets these events in motion. That, you know, Artur, he might end up fighting his mandatory challenger next as a result of Joe choosing to do that himself. I mean, look, Joe Smith Jr. versus Artur Beterbiev is a mouth-watering fight because both guys stand a chance of taking the other guy out. You know, Joey, he can crack. Guy hits hard. And, you know, Artur, he hits hard too. He comes from an extensive amateur background, and he's not just a puncher, but both guys pack enough punch that there's a chance they could take the other out. There are obvious risks involved with a Beterbiev versus Smith Jr. fight. So if you're Joe and you want to make yourself some money, you know, you don't go that way straight away. And it just is what it is because that's what's going on, okay? That's what's happening. So Artur might be fighting Marcus. Educated southpaw, Marcus Browne, former Olympian. Good movement, good straight punches, good stab to the body, decent power, doesn't take the best punch, and, you know...
Artur's the biggest puncher in this division.
He's not just some come-forward mauler that leads with his face. I reiterate, this guy comes from a very solid amateur background. He knows how to get to his man. He's already had his tune-up fight against Adam Dionese, and if this is what's next, well, I don't think it ends well for Marcus.
I think they're going to have to send him out.
Marcus Browne and his people, they say they want to fight. And, you know, I don't know if the people over there at the PBC want to foot the bill for this thing. I think they're going to have to send Marcus out for this title shot the way that they sent out Brian Castano.
His title shot against Patrick Teixeira.
You know, on the PBC side of things, there's nothing for Marcus Browne to fight for. There ain't no major titles on that side of the street. The WBA is in the process of phasing out interim and Reggie belts. So if he wants a title, he's going to have to go out there and fight for one.
I don't know that the PBC wants to foot the bill for this fight.
I think they might let Marcus cross over because at this point in the juncture, Marcus is expendable. He doesn't have a belt. They don't have that big a stake in the light heavyweight division. And it's at his peril.
You want it, go get it.
And if it happens, I think that's the way it's going to happen. I do. And that's not the only news coming out of the light heavyweight division. Callum Johnson is going to be returning to action on September the 11th against Nicolette. And, you know, I thought about this and what Queensbury Promotions has on the docket, what they have in the itinerary. They got this in September, and they've got the Lyndon Arthur versus Anthony Yarde rematch in October, which is intended to segue into the Wilder versus Fury.
The trilogy.
You know, looking at this, I thought to myself, Lyndon Arthur, he beat Anthony Yarde comprehensively, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I didn't have any trouble scoring that fight, and I don't really see the precedence for a rematch. I would have much rather seen Anthony Yarde and Callum Johnson lock horns with each other. Two big punchers who aren't...
They're not afraid to let their hands go.
I mean, I'm not against the rematch, you understand, but stylistically, I actually think Johnson versus Yarde makes for a more cracking fight than Arthur versus Yarde. We've already seen Arthur versus Yarde, and as far as I'm concerned, Lyndon beat Anthony comprehensively. So, you know, it is what it is. I'm going to tune in regardless, but, I vaguely recall hearing that there was something wrong with Lyndon Arthur's right hand in that fight. He essentially beat Anthony Yarde with one hand. So what's he going to do to him with two? The situation I see is a situation to where, at minimum, I'm expecting the winner of this rematch to, at some point, face Callum Johnson.
Regardless of who the winner is.
Whether it's repeat or revenge. And finally, the big news per tweet from Mike Coppinger and his sources, Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant have agreed to a deal for a November pay-per-view fight presented by the PBC. All 468-pound belts on the line. Canelo Alvarez on the Caleb Plant fight being set for November 6th. I'm very happy about this and about becoming the first undisputed Latino super middleweight champion in boxing history. I'm happy to make history. I'm going to unify all the belts.
They're looking at Las Vegas for this thing.
And at least based on what preliminary reports are out there, per Mike Coppinger's sources, this is set to be a one-fight deal. This ain't a multi-fight deal that Canelo Alvarez has walked into. Though there is a possibility that Canelo Alvarez will do more business with the PBC beyond this fight because they do have Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez. These guys, they'd hope to stick in there with Canelo Alvarez to stage pay-per-views moving forward.
I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that he sticks around.
That is on his own terms. That he might do another fight with the PBC after the Plant fight, provided he wins. Maybe he fights Jermall Charlo, somebody like that, because I told you, Jermall Charlo, time has shown that he's not the puncher at 160 that he was at 154. He just ain't the same knockout artist that he was in a fight with Canelo Alvarez. That would presumably take place at 168 pounds, where Canelo Alvarez would be holding all the belts.
Out of all the guys that want to fight Canelo,
or to a better beef, Dimitri Bivol, Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade, Jermall Charlo. Out of all those guys, I'd have to say that Jermall is the least risky opponent among them.
a fight like that could do good business.
Relatively speaking, it could in a state like the state of Texas, where Canelo Alvarez has a rather large contingent of fans. And Jermall, he's got his little cult following. Couple of guys, couple of girls. They like him too. And, after a Plant fight, you could look at a Jermall Charlo as a lighter touch, so to speak. I mean, a lighter touch than what else is out there. It's a lighter touch than a Bivol, lighter touch than a Beterbiev.
Yeah, compared to those guys, it is.
It's a lighter touch compared to a David Benavidez. I mean, Jermall Charlo is the least risky opponent for Canelo Alvarez. So maybe after that Plant fight, if he wins and he unifies all those belts, he does that fight afterwards. He does that fight too before he decides what his next move is. Because the thing is, Canelo's been on a title run.
Yeah.
He's been trying to unify this division. And after he does that, maybe he has a lighter touch in between. Who's to say he doesn't return to the light heavyweight division? Lest we forget, he briefly entertained the possibility of a Dimitri Bivol fight. But due to the allotted time, just wasn't
Wasn't a big enough window to do that fight.
and do it in September after the Plant fight initially collapsed. We don't know here and now what it is Canelo Alvarez is going to do beyond that Caleb Plant fight if he wins, if he becomes this division's undisputed champion. A fight with Jermall Charlo, a fight with David Benavidez, those are all fights that could do good business, but those are also all fights where Canelo's the champion. Canelo's bringing the belts to the table. I could see him possibly having one more fight with the PBC, but beyond that, he might decide to go back up to light heavyweight. He might decide to fight the likes of a Dimitri Bivol or somebody like that.
Go on a title run at 175.
As far as Eddie Hearn,
His involvement.
well, it's obviously not going to be a matchroom show, but per reports, he's going to be Canelo Alvarez's point man for Canelo Alvarez's promotional company.
He's going to be working on Canelo's behalf.
And I think that bit of information requires more clarification.
What, is Canelo Alvarez the lead promoter? Not sure.
PBC and Fox are footing the bill for this thing. They're the ones that are footing the bill. And what that essentially means is that now, since DAZN ain't got to worry about hosting Canelo Alvarez's next fight, they can go ahead and roll out their fall schedule.
Yeah, Chocolatito versus Estrada 3.
Hopefully Mikey Garcia versus Regis Prograrius. There seemed to have been a wavering commitment to that fight just a few days ago when Eddie Hearn talked about it. Wasn't sure if DAZN wanted to do it, but now that Canelo Alvarez has moved forward with the Plant fight, and that fight is set to go down on the PBC and Fox side of things, well, DAZN ain't got to worry about paying that guy $20, $25, $30, $35 million. They got that many more resources to play with to line up their own fall schedule. So now things can start moving forward in that area.
I think they should pick up the Garcia versus Prograis fight.
There have been a lot of gripes, a lot of complaints as of late that Matchroom isn't shelling out enough content for their American subscribers. And that is a fight that would get the American fight fans' attention. It's a titillating match, even though there's not a title on the line. I'm pretty sure a lot of American fight fans would like to see Mikey Garcia versus Regis Prograis. They're two top-tier, top-shelf guys at 140 pounds that can box and can punch.
They ought to throw a couple of dollars at that fight.
You know, there were so many narratives associated with this entire Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant situation. People actually alleging that Canelo Alvarez would duck, would avoid Caleb Plant of all people.
Yeah, break.
And I think those people have got a lot of crow.
I mean, seriously?
You actually believed that Canelo Alvarez had something to avoid in Caleb Plant, given the track record that he's already amassed. These people don't live on a little place I like to call Earth.
I'll say almost anything.
Almost anything, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, and it's all because for some strange reason, they pledge fealty to Al Haymon and the PBC when it's crystal clear what happened here. You do things on Canelo's terms, or you don't do things.
You don't do nothing.
You know, as I read through this news, one thing that really caught my eye is that Canelo Alvarez is among the lead promoters for this fight, and Canelo Alvarez is appointing Eddie Hearn as his point man. I mean, this ain't one of your subordinates. This ain't some fucking employee. This ain't Jamal Charlo you're dealing with.
They thought Al Haymon could pull Canelo's strings.
Al Haymon and the PBC, when it looks more to me like Canelo Alvarez is pulling theirs. They're moving heaven and earth to be able to host a Canelo Alvarez fight.
And if they're lucky, they'll get more than one.
Matchroom's gotten 3 since Canelo parted ways with Golden Boy Promotions, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to speak prematurely. These reports are preliminary reports. We don't yet know what's in the fine print. The good news is that the fight is happening, and boxing as a sport really did need that pick-me-up.
So hopefully 2021 finishes with a bang.